Hello and welcome back to the JKYog Youth Conference 2020, bringing together innovators from different fields, Ivy League academics, and motivational speakers and individuals who have made a difference to the community and to people. The goal of this conference is to inspire and ignite that spark in youth uh, to problem solve, to become a change maker, and to give them the tools and the resources that they need in order to do that, both the internal tools as well as the external tools. And I hope that so far you've been having a wonderful time listening to our immensely qualified, honored speakers. And continuing the trend, we have next Dr. Kevin Majors. Um, he has served on the faculty of Harvard Medical School for the past decade, teaching cognitive behavioral therapy to psychiatrists in training at the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. He trained in medicine and psychiatry at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical School in Dallas. So, those of you all at Radhakrishna Temple of Dallas, and those of you all joining us from Dallas, yay for you. Um, and completed a fellowship in cognitive behavioral therapy at the Beck Institute in Philadelphia. He also maintains a private practice in Harvard Square. And just a little more about Dr. Majors, he's very interested in mentoring. And he has a foundation called Optimal Work. And Optimal Work is one of the partners of the JKYog Youth Conference. Optimal Work actually deals with how to approach your work and in a more productive fashion. And it gives you various strategies to work on your mind. Really, utilize the science of the mind to enhance your potential to learn and to do work and to grow. And so Dr. Major's talk today is on the topic Transform Anxiety by Working at Your Best, which I feel is an amazing topic because it talks about, it's one thing to avoid something. It is one thing to approach something, and it's quite another to transform it. So there's, these three kinds of approaches that you can have. And so with something like anxiety, when you're able to transform it to actually work at your best, um, that's when you're like you've utilized that very thing that was troubling you to give you success and peace of mind. So, Dr. Majors, this session will be moderated by Ms. Swapna Punyakotishwaran. Once again, Ms. Swapna is one of the pillars of JKYog since its inception, and she has worked on developing the JKYog online platform that we see today, through which this youth conference broadcast has been made possible. Dr. Majors, I will turn it over to you. Thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you so much, Aditi. And I'm very happy to be here today and speaking at this Ignite Your Potential. It's really a beautiful concept that each of us has this incredible potential to grow and to serve others. And in my life, that has been really captured by this idea of working at your very best and seeing how central that is to thriving and to really living a life where love and service are the main themes. And ultimately, our potential is to love and to serve others by growing as much as we can. So my career has mostly focused on anxiety and helping people to overcome anxiety disorders. Over the decades that I've been studying these things, our understanding of anxiety has been radically transformed. We used to think of something like anxiety, something to be managed. And we would try to get people to calm down. And many times that's when people come to me for help, so I have a private practice and I also spend time, each week teaching at Harvard Medical School. And the calming down, trying to fight anxiety, trying to manage it is misunderstanding what is actually a gift that allows you to ignite your potential. And it's just as Aditi said, the very thing that seems so bad actually is a wonderful gift that allows you to attain your highest abilities. And now we have the science to back this up. So I'm going to share my screen here with you. And just to go through a nice understanding that what probably captures this more than anything is students of psychology will recognize this graph I'm about to draw. It's called Yerkes-Dodson. And it's from over a century ago. These researchers were looking at the relationship between performance and adrenaline. And imagine a person is going, like, think of something that you're going to do that will make you anxious. So it could be like an exam you have coming up, a really big exam. And the question is, what happens to your performance on that exam as your adrenaline goes up? And what most people think is that a bit of adrenaline helps. But then it stops helping, and then it starts hurting your performance. And so what they try to do is, once they feel their performance is being impeded, they try lowering their adrenaline level by calming down. There's another possibility, though, which is that your performance only goes up with your adrenaline level. This is now the fascinating thing that it's the centerpiece of what I want to tell you about, which is that anxiety is simply adrenaline that you're dreading. It's adrenaline that has a negative frame on it. When our bodies are facing challenges, or you're facing a challenge like a test that you want to do well on or a presentation you want to do on, your system gives you adrenaline. And if you welcome it and say, bring it on, and you try to just use it to do your very best, then there is really no limit to how much the adrenaline can help you. It's just helpful. There's no ceiling effect on how much adrenaline can boost your performance. See, anxiety is simply adrenaline that you're dreading, but adrenaline is the secret to unlocking your highest performance in life. I really wish everyone could understand the importance of that, because there's, in many cases, like a huge industry right now of getting people to try lowering their adrenaline levels, when adrenaline is what gives you your highest IQ. Adrenaline gives you your best ability to speak and to synthesize information and to do calculations and to write. Adrenaline helps you to stay in flow, which is the highest state of focus. We'll talk more about that. And so adrenaline is the key to performing at your very best. So you don't want to try to lower it. You want to ride the wave and aim simply at doing your best. Instead of worrying about it or trying to, think about how it's making you look or feel, no, you simply aim to serve, to provide the best performance, and then it merely helps you. So, but many times what happens is, people, they start worrying about a performance as it's getting closer or when the test is starting or the presentation is starting, and then they start viewing adrenaline as something bad. The moment your view of adrenaline turns negative, you go down to this lower curve, and this is anxiety. The upper curve is simply excitement. So what people need to do then is to be able to flip this back, get your adrenaline viewed positively again. And that is a skill called reframing. Reframing is when you take the thing you're dreading, in this case, adrenaline itself, and you see it as providing help and being an opportunity. And then you can say, bring it on, and you welcome the adrenaline. Right? If you can flip your approach to adrenaline to welcome it, it changes your brain. It's called the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the appraisal center. That rules your fear system. And once you view whatever the challenge is as something good for you, your appraisal center up there lights up, and now adrenaline goes to making your brain perform better. If you dread it, it turns off. If you try relaxing, you try calming down, you're really dreading adrenaline, and then that center turns off because you're viewing it as a threat. And then it goes to your heart and your peripheral muscles, and you start sweating, you start getting nervous, and you feel it in your body. It's getting you ready for the fight or flight response. So adrenaline either helps your body or it helps your mind. It helps your body to fight or flee, which if it's a real threat, that's good. Or it helps your mind so that you're able to think and to speak and to connect better to others. So adrenaline is like a superpower, but especially once you start learning the art of reframing. Okay, so taking something you were dreading and instead asking yourself the question, how can this bring out the best in me? How is this giving me an opportunity for practice? So people need to stretch themselves in what they try doing. Right? That I'll stop sharing for a second. People need to set high goals for themselves that require them to stretch. And as they do that, they're going to come against some need for adrenaline. And that is the opportunity to practice, to get out of the comfort zone and to learn how to approach adrenaline and the situations that provoke it as giving you exactly the practice you need, which is actually learning how to use adrenaline well. So adrenaline raises your IQ if you welcome it. A wonderful book on this topic is called The Upside of Stress by Kelly McGonigal at Stanford. And so she reviews many of these things in that book. Now, wanted to go a little more into what's happening inside when people are anxious. And what I'm going to do here is I'll share my screen again. Let's try to understand anxiety as best we can. And I'm going to show you a model here, which is a very complete, I think, account of how anxiety works. It all starts with the amygdala. So the amygdala is a little organ in your brain, and the amygdala's job is to detect threats. It scans everything in your mind, in your imagination, but that your eyes see and your ears hear, everything within you, everything outside of you. All of that data is sifted by your amygdala, looking for things that have been identified as threats. And when it detects a threat, it sounds the alarm. That alarm is what you experience as anxiety. It's simply adrenaline plus a little bit of tension in your chest. And then the amygdala watches your response. Okay, so that is where you actually have freedom. Because up until this point, you don't have any real freedom. It just happens. But the amygdala is looking for signs of approach, that you're approaching the supposed threat, in which case that will feed back and decrease the threat label for next time. And that's called habituation or safety learning. If a person instead avoids things, if the amygdala sees signs of avoidance, well, that's going to feed back and increase the threat label for next time. And that's called threat learning. Okay, so take an example of, say, someone who has a fear of heights. And let's say that they have to go out on a balcony. They're at a friend's house and there's a balcony and everyone is going out to the balcony and they want to go out there, but now their amygdala detects the threat and it's pretty high up, so they get nervous. Their amygdala detects the heights, which they're afraid of, and then starts sounding the alarm and their heart rate goes up and they start getting, they get nervous. They start breathing a little faster. Well, that is the key moment. If in that moment they go to the balcony, assuming it's all safe, and approach that threat, that's going to feed back and teach the amygdala in that very moment that this is not a threat. That means that the next time they go to a place and there's a balcony, they'll be a little less afraid. Let me show you here what that looks like. I'll draw that. I think that what I'm about to show you is one of the most helpful graphs that you could ever see, because it's how all growth occurs. And here, this would be anxiety on a scale of 0 to 10. And this is just time. And as you go on the balcony, say you're very afraid of it, and you go on the balcony for the first time. Well, your anxiety is going to go very high, perhaps. But if you stay there, this is what happens. Your anxiety comes down. And it always does that. That is what's called habituation. I'll do this a little more straight. Habituation always has basically that same shape. It goes up, but then you get through it and it goes down. It's like a wave that you ride. And what that means is that the next time, your anxiety will be less. If you go on the very same balcony the next day, it's less. And the next day you go again, it's going to be less and less and less. Each time you do it, there's some safety learning that has occurred until you get extinction. There is practically nothing in psychiatry as well proven as what I just showed you, these curves. The opposite is also the case. And this would be what happens if you go on the balcony and then instead of, you get anxious, you're saying your anxiety starts going up and then you avoid it. Again, anxiety is 0 to 10. Well, then the moment you escape from the balcony, your fear just goes down. It just drops because now you've left it. But that's threat learning. The next time you go to the balcony, it's going to be higher. And if you leave it again, boom, goes down, threat learning. And the next time it goes higher. The worst of all is if you try leaving the balcony and you try escaping and you can't and you get stuck. And it just stays high. And that's called thwarted escape. Okay, so this is how threat learning works, also called sensitization. Okay, now going back to this, you can see safety learning can only happen when the alarm is sounding. If your amygdala hasn't detected a threat and sounded the alarm, it's not watching your response. And you can't talk to your amygdala. It's lacking a cell layer. It doesn't have language. So you don't reason with it, you show it. But the only time you can show it is the very moment it's sounding the alarm. And you show it by approaching the thing that you're afraid of. And as you do that, it gets easier and easier and easier. Okay, now, this is where we can start talking about how do you do this best? What's the very best way to do this kind of safety learning? Because if you do it well, this whole curve could take 90 minutes to get to this point, or it could take 90 seconds to get to that point, right? And so it depends on 3 things. Each of these 3 things are ways in which you're actually really trying to be pushing up on your anxiety. And the more you push up on it, which is really approaching it, the more it goes down. Okay, so what does it mean then to be pushing up? Well, the first thing is reframing. The second is mindfulness. And then the third is embracing the challenge. Now, if you go up here, you'll see that the first thing the amygdala does is detect the threat. Well, that detection of the threat can be kind of modulated by your higher cortex and you using your higher cortex. When instead of just going along with the automatic labeling of your amygdala that, oh, here's a threat, you instead use the freedom of your mind to deliberately reassess it as an opportunity. And that's called reframing. So reframing is when you deliberately take your appraisal and make it into something positive. And you do that not by an act of the will, it's an act of understanding. You have to take this whole experience and put it in the bigger context of your life and ask yourself, how is this thing that I'm dreading giving me an opportunity to grow, to learn, to practice, if I really become good at this thing, and for instance, even welcoming anxiety itself, will being able to do that make me more able and available to love and serve others? If so, the the very ideals you have of loving and serving others give you the context that turns everything positive. So whatever it is that you might be facing, think of anything in your life you're dreading right now. Even let's say you have to go on a car ride with someone with a bad sense of humor and you know they're going to tell bad jokes and you're dreading it, or they're going to listen to music you don't like. And you might be kind of dreading the whole thing without realizing it. Well, you could catch yourself and say, wait a minute, this is really going to give me an opportunity to expand the type of music I like, to be patient, to be generous, to be kind. And once you have these ideals in mind, particularly, think of ways that really that you can grow in generosity and being encouraging of others. Ideals provide you this broad, deep context that can always let you see, I can grow here. And whatever it is you might be dreading, you can say, okay, this is going to give me an opportunity uh, to bring out the best in myself. Maybe if there's a class you're taking, say you're taking an economics class. I just gave this example recently in another video, but if you're taking an economics class and then there's math in it, let's say you hate math, well, you could just dread it and then try to get through it quickly, try to get it done. But that's leaving it as a threat. Instead, you could say, you know what? In the big picture of my life, if I'm more creative when I face challenges like this, will I be better off? Yes, undoubtedly. Then you can say, great, bring it on. I don't like math right now. I don't like math yet. But if I can be more creative in how I embrace these types of challenges, I'll grow. So you look for ways of being creative, being open, right? Learning new strategies for dealing with math. All of that's what I call reframing. What reframing does is it makes this more powerful, this feedback on the threat label, because it's really like part of your upper cortex here is feeding back and making that safety learning happen even faster. This is also why when we do exposure exercises with people in therapy, you can never force it. You can't make them do exposure things. And parents can't make their kids face up to things, but what they can do is help people put it in a bigger context. And to be encouraging for another person is really just helping them to reframe the challenge, put it in the context of growth and love and service. The next part is sounding the alarm. This is also a fascinating thing that when your amygdala makes you anxious, you get the sense of tension in your chest. If at that moment you open up and feel the anxiety in your chest as fully as you can, that sends a message received signal back up to your amygdala, and it lets it turn the alarm off. So whenever you get anxious, you want to mindfully welcome the sensation of anxiety, especially in the chest. People who worry a lot typically don't do this, and instead they try to think their way out of the feeling. But that can be a vicious cycle. Instead, you open up to the sensation, and that can just drain the energy from worry and allow people to then be present with their whole mind and thoughts in the present moment. And then embracing the challenge means leaning into it. So if you think about what it would be like to be afraid of heights, and then you're going to be facing this exposure of the balcony, the first thing is seeing that not as something bad to be dreaded and got through, but as precisely the learning that you need to learn how to welcome adrenaline, how to ride the wave of anxiety, how to change your relationship to anxiety. If you can overcome fear, you can overcome any obstacle, because nothing makes you want to avoid more than fear. And even other emotions can be thought of in terms of fear. Depression, you can think of, I believe, as a phobia of being depleted of energy. And so people withdraw from things that take energy. Addictions are really phobias of cravings. And so people they're afraid of the craving. Really, there's deep wisdom saying if you can overcome fear, you overcome emotions ruling your life, and instead you can reframe the trigger as a moment to be living your highest ideals. and to be growing in precisely the way you need, literally changing your brain. Because when you approach, say, that balcony with this attitude of, this is exactly the practice I need, bring it on, and you open up to the feeling in your chest, and you perhaps even go to the railing of the balcony and look over, that would be leaning in and embracing the challenge. When you do that, you are shaping your brain very powerfully now to see this thing is not a threat at all, and that anxiety itself is not a threat. That unlocks new potential for growth in your life. What's especially now fascinating to start talking about work is that the very same steps, reframing, mindfulness, and embracing the challenge, which you use, to make short work of anxiety triggers, those same 3 steps allow you to attain your highest state of focus when you're working. The highest state of focus is called flow, right? And flow is the result of your entire cortex being properly aligned, giving you your greatest intellectual power. You only have your highest IQ when you're in flow. You have your highest ability to speak and to write and to work when you're in flow. When you're in conversations with loved ones, you're in flow because love naturally produces flow. Flow is a state that you can enter at will once you master those steps of reframing and mindfulness and challenge. And the way to do it is think about what you do when you sit down to work. Do you just dive into the task, like rush in, hoping maybe to get fast progress and to make it done to get it done very quickly? Or do you take a moment to pause and to put it in the big picture of how you most want to grow, of how asking yourself, what's the most beautiful way that I could do this next hour of work? How would you make it into a work of art? Think about your process of, maybe it's reading a chapter, or it's working on a paper or a presentation, whatever it may be. And this applies to any kind of work, even cleaning a room. To think of what would be the best, most beautiful way with the greatest harmony of going about doing this work. Okay, that image of the beautiful is the guiding light that is reframing. But most people, when they sit down to work, don't really think about it. Now, ideally, if you were to get that light into a little brighter resolution, what you would see is what you're aiming for, ultimately, like, why am I doing this? And ultimately, it has to be love. That you're working to love. You're working for the people that you love. That you're able to love the most important people in your life by doing this work well. You're shaping yourself in this hour of work so that you can give your very best to others. So the sense of growth, the sense of service gives work purpose because it shapes how you envision the next hour of work you're about to do. That is like seeing the top of the mountain. But then you also need to see the path for getting there. And that's, how can you break down this next hour's work into some steps? That will be the little outcomes you're trying to achieve, right? If you do that, you get this image of the steps you want to go through. And so if you're writing a paper, okay, well, first I'm going to review what is exactly the prompt, what are the resources I'm wanting to use, how much time will I give myself to reviewing those resources, making an outline. But you just break it the next hour down into 10 to 15 minute steps, at least a few, so that those are in order now in your mind. Okay, that would be reframing. The second step takes it might take 30 seconds or it might take a minute. And that is to be mindful, to really kind of turn on mindfulness so that in your mind, you're able to silence your attention completely. See, what reframing does, and you imagine a task coming up, is it puts order into your mind of like, here's the track I want to go down. Mindfulness gets you ready for the first step. We have two types of attention, two forms of attention. There's front and back. The background attention, called the default mode network, is always thinking about what to do next. Now, it's where distractions come from, but it's also what enables flow, because the default attention can pull your task to attention, which is in the present moment, through the next hour's work. And that pull is what puts you into flow. What mindfulness does is it completely just activates task attention and gets your default attention ready to start pulling it through the task. How does your default attention know how to pull you through the task? Well, because you saw the steps in advance. So laying out some steps for how you're going to work allows your default attention to know the path to pull you through. But then right before you start working, to settle your mind and bring it to complete silence and stillness. It's like pulling back on a bow. And as you pull back on the bow, say you're trying to shoot an arrow, you're increasing the power then of the launch. That's what mindfulness does right before doing some kind of task. So you're increasing the potential energy of your focus. And then you can launch into the task, aiming to do as well as you can, as generously as you can, until the very last moment. Reframing and mindfulness, and then challenge. Challenge is embracing the steps you're going to go through and challenging yourself to do it as well as you possibly can. Challenge is what allows you to innovate, to set higher goals for yourself. Think of a pole vaulter who is trying to practice pole vaulting. What would it look like if they didn't have a bar that they're trying to cross in their practice? Well, there's no way it could bring out their best energies. There's no way it could bring out their best effort or adrenaline. The bar is what turns pole vaulting into an Olympic sport. And in practice, the bar is what allows you to improve. It's very important before you start working, you don't just go through the same way trying to get it done. That wouldn't be treating it like an opportunity. So instead, you try to see it as, how can this bring out the best in me? How can I stretch myself in it? If you set a bar that's high, now this is something that gets your adrenaline going and then allows you to attain your peak performance. It's that final step of challenge that allows you to enter into flow. And that has to be the way that we approach life overall. Giving our best hour by hour in each moment. The wonderful thing about work is that it repeats throughout the day. So if you can learn to turn work into like a gym for your personal growth according to your highest ideals, you can attain something that in the secular literature is called vital engagement. With vital engagement, your highest ideals are brought down to the smallest actions. The greatest, most universal and powerful love that you can have as a motive is now being made concrete in action after action as you go through your day. Vital engagement is continuous flow, lived throughout the day. And that happens when we can reframe and set challenges for ourselves in small incremental ways throughout the day. So we have to have the kind of love that can be so intense it's brought into the smallest actions, the smallest things, even how you open and close a door. Just this sense of putting love into everything, shaping ourselves with self-mastery and discipline so that we can then be the best version of ourselves and then give the best that we have to others. If we live like that, using each hour of work, we can attain to this vital engagement and then have the lives that are fully actualizing to the extent that we can our human potential. So thank you very much for your attention so far in this talk. And if there are questions, I'm I'm happy to answer them.
Wonderful, Dr. Kevin. That was a very, very power-packed presentation, I would say. Very,
Thank you.
very beautifully you summarized, uh, the concept of how to face anxiety. In fact, not only face anxiety, but convert that,
Yes.
to our benefit, and set high goals, come out of your comfort zone, and look for opportunity in the face of fear. And I really liked your concept of flow, which is which is what is going to produce the maximum output or make you the most efficient, and really unleash the potential that lies within each one of us, and the three-step approach as to how practically we can work in flow. And what was so interesting hearing you speak, Dr. Kevin, was the principles that you were telling, basically refraining, mindfulness, and embracing the challenges are very much in line to the JKYog principles and the JKYog teachings that Swamiji teaches all of us. So, I was really, really astonished to hear that from you as well. And truly, that is the way to go. And our youth community will definitely benefit a lot, especially given that they have to, face this so-called stress as young as being in high school and eventually. So with that,
Mm.
we can move on to the question and answer session. Request the viewers to please post your questions in the chat, and we will be more than happy to take the questions. And Dr. Kevin will be more than happy to answer them for us. Uh, so, some of the questions that I had, that I wanted to start off with, Dr. Kevin. See, typically in this fast paced world, right, there's always this anxiety. The to do list never ends, right? Be
Mm-hmm.
it at work or be it at home, wherever it is. And every time, what happens is your balance, right, between your be it your professional life and personal life, or even certain cases the health factor, right, because you just keep working, you lose track of time, you eat into the midnight hours, and it just gets piled up. So do you have any tips that you can share to our participants on how we can strike that balance and still not get anxious and embrace the change?
Yeah, it's a great question. And this is something that everyone faces, which is ultimately do I, what am I willing to sacrifice for the outcomes I'm wanting to attain? So to some extent, if there's a short issue that comes up where you have to give above and beyond what you'd have to normally give, then you can ask yourself, okay, if I'm maybe this will help me to have more grit, to have a greater toughness. And maybe it's good, this is giving me good practice in doing that. But you don't really want to become practiced at sacrificing your ideals for outcomes. That would be the wrong kind of practice to have. And so people have to be very sincere in asking themselves, at this point, am I, for the sake of some outcome, some wealth, some possession, some achievement, which maybe could have meaning and could be good, but it becomes an end in itself. See, there's a deep issue in us. Are we working for outcomes pursued as their own ends? Or are we working for love and service? And this division in motive gets into the very division in our brain between the left brain and the right brain. The left brain is always trying to just get outcomes done. And so it gets very driven. And needless to say, all worrying and ruminating and obsessing is left brain. So this churning, and what makes it hard when people try to meditate, the churning that can happen in all the words, very left brained.
Mm.
The right brain is what you use if you can, say, in meditating, attain to silence, especially to silent love, to experiencing yourself upheld in being. So the silent sense of being held in being and loved is entirely right-brained.
Mhm.
And so the right brain is how we connect to being, to reality and God and others. So the right brain is inherently spiritual, you could say, and open to these things.
Mm.
While the left brain is very much about getting things done, and it's materialist and consumerist and reductionistic. So it just wants more and more and more. Now, what I have been showing you with reframing and mindfulness and challenge, I think is a very clever way of getting the left brain again serving the right brain. And that's why you want to do it in the substance of your work itself. So that in the very core of your work, you're trying to now bring in the highest ideals so that it shapes the task and how you do it. That's why I started optimalwork.com, to help walk people through those steps. The idea is that because the left brain is always rushing and diving into things and just getting things done, if you can pause for a few minutes before you start an hour of work, doing what I call a golden hour. A
Mm.
golden hour is an hour that you intentionally shape so you bring your highest ideals into it. Not only do you go into flow and get far more done, but you become better by means of it. And I think if people can really work at their best, interesting, isn't it, that working at your best actually requires having better motives than just getting things done and accumulating outcomes. To actually go into flow, you can't really have that as the goal.
Mm.
True flow, which is the highest state of productivity, is the fruit of reframing and mindfulness and setting these challenges of generosity. Interesting. So I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Dr. Kevin. I really liked your concept of how we can use the materialistic side of the brain to feed the spiritual side. And
It has to be a servant. Yes.
very nicely said. And I like the way you outlined it, right? Make love and service the objective. And,
Yeah.
when that is the objective, you're focused on doing the right thing, and the outcomes in terms of success and whatever it is naturally going to follow you.
Yes. I think that we don't own the outcomes of our action. It's given to us by God, by and the whole of reality. All we can control ourselves is the process. So it's how we go about doing it. But that we can continually improve, and we can get better and better. So I'm not telling people to simply have no outcomes. No, outcomes serve love and service. Outcomes, the left brain, is not a useless appendage. No, it's actually how you become the greatest people that you can, to give the best to your communities, to give the best to the world. And we need people, we need those kind of heroes today who have the highest motives and combine that with working at their very best. And I think that it's beautiful to see, in my mind, that these two things go so much together, that the motive produces a way of working which is far beyond what you can do with just having a more effective to-do list.
Amazing. I just cannot stop commenting on this. Is exactly right. The outcome is something that is given to us. I
Yes.
just love that. And that's actually the essence of the Bhagavad Gita as well, right? Where you just focus on the effort and, the outcomes.
There's
Uh,
such a deep wisdom in that. Yes, and
Absolutely.
I'm so happy to hear and see that that's the same idea, that it's the sense that you don't own the fruit of your action. So that you are not, which I think is in the Bhagavad Gita, that it's you that but that this is something given to you. Even your own act of being, your very sense that you are existing right now, your breath, your life, your act of being are ultimately one thing. And it's an effect. You're not the cause of it. And that's what true meditation makes you aware of, I think. The sense that this is all, the being is a completely right brain concept. And it's what's lacking in many ideas of modern science and scientism. Uh, and I think that we need to come back to this perception, that that being is the ground for beauty and for wisdom and for love, and to get back to that sense of being. And mindfulness does that.
I wish we had more time to continue discussion on this topic. Very well said, Dr. Kevin. There are a few more questions coming from our audience, so
All
let
right.
me take them. So, one of the questions, actually, two of them have a related question. Um, so, how about some negative, fearful thoughts that come in the way? And a related question is, how can patients with PTSD and mental illness do when negative talk is constant, when they are trying to do mindfulness and vital engagement?
Yeah. Yeah. So always the way to deal with difficulties, with challenges, things that you would dread, no matter what they are, is to ask, how can this bring out the best in me? And if I can learn the right way of practicing approaching this, then how would I want to be more free to love and serve others? Now, doing work with, with trauma, uh, I think that certainly that you would want to have, I think, a therapist who understands these things. Uh, the broadest outlines are that PTSD is a phobia of a memory. OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, is the phobia of an irrational thought. Worrying is a result of a phobia of a rational thought. So these are the different types of disorders people can have where their thoughts themselves become the problem. When a person is practicing mindfulness, learning to silence those thoughts, uh, they get back in touch with reality to be grounded in it. So sometimes people can do a grounding exercise. And if people, you can probably Google that phrase, grounding exercise. The typical one is you try to just observe, for instance, 5 colors around you, 5 different colors. And then once you've done that, 5 different sounds you tune into around you. And once you've done that, 5 different textures. And then you do 4 colors, 4 sounds, 4 textures, 3, 3, 3, 2, 2, 2, 1, 1, 1. That's called a grounding exercise. What that does is it gets people tethered back to reality so that they're not in the thoughts in their heads. With repeated mindfulness practice, you increase the dose of parasympathetic activation. Parasympathetics have an additive effect. So it's called parasympathetic tone. In fact, I'll just to show people how powerful this stuff is, I'll share my screen again quick. And what you can see here, is exactly at the 40-second mark. This is the heart rate. So you can see HRV, and you see a heart rate now, and you can see it going up and down in the 70s, down to the 50s. And this is just to show you that when people are meditating or practicing, that their heart rate goes into this sine wave pattern. That sine wave pattern is what gets people healed, from anxiety and chronic stress. It's called parasympathetic activation, and it makes your heart rate slow as you exhale, and then rise again as you inhale, and then slow as you exhale, even into the 50s, and then go back up again as you inhale. So that kind of mindfulness has a profound physiological effect, and it's the more you get it during the day, the stronger you get at turning off the opposite, which is called sympathetics. Maybe this is, it's a lot to go into at once, but you can see this beautiful sine wave. Just to say that our bodies are designed to heal. No one is ever permanently damaged, I believe. We can always find a way of making peace with the past and the present and the future. Now, it's not to say that bad things don't happen and that there are terrible losses that are real, but yet there are still there is still people in our lives that need us. There are still ways we can encourage others. There are still ways we can love and serve others. the capacity to do that is never permanently lost through, no matter what can happen in our life.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. And I love the representation that you showed using the sine wave. I think drives home the message very nicely. There's a very interesting question that has come in from the audience, and it is about procrastination. How can we use this knowledge, this mindfulness technique, to avoid procrastination?
Mm-hmm. Well, procrastination is a kind of a neutral description of when people delay getting started on something. That can be a way of, it's not always a bad strategy. As long as you have enough order in your life that you won't have a last minute crisis. But making sure you can get things done in a small amount of time can sometimes be done by delaying things. Ordinarily, though, what procrastination means is that you're relying on adrenaline to get things done, the adrenaline you get when the deadline is approaching, rather than relying on your commitment to love and serve others. So it's a bit short-sighted, because if it becomes a pattern, you end up living just to get things done. And you don't end up crafting your work and trying so that brings out the best in you. So it's a much better way of living to have the ability to sit down and craft an hour of work using your full freedom to do that, rather than the sense, people lose a sense of freedom when they rely on procrastination. Their life starts to feel out of control. And they end up sacrificing many things in their personal lives and many things, with other people. And somehow their procrastination gives them permission to do that. It's like, oh, I have this big deadline tomorrow, and so I can't do this, that, and the other for my family or my friends. So I think when people see like that they have a pattern of procrastinating, usually they have a habit of putting projects over people and relying on emotions to get things done. And they use procrastination to give themselves adrenaline. Now, instead, it'd be great for them to approach a week as, how do I form a strategy for each week? For each day, how do I make a strategy? And then to get better at just making that deliberate, so that when you start a day, you glance at the day as a whole and you see it as something to shape. You see the day as an opportunity, and then you try to see, how can I give the best today? And then you go about coming up with the right schedule for the day. The best schedule you can have is working intensely for about an hour, might be 90 minutes, might be 45 minutes. Take a 10-minute break, and then another intense hour to 90 minutes, and then a break. And to have this idea of sprints and breaks. The breaks are time for family and friends and nature and silence, not for email so much, unless it's right before a meal, and not social media, not news, but to try to have a sense of calming the mind, getting it off your work, and then coming back to it. There's a lot of reasons for that, but just to say, a daily schedule with some sprints mixed with breaks gives you the most sustainable high energy throughout the entire day.
Great. I love this. Instead of working based on the adrenaline, if we can be more planned and organized,
Yes.
we will be working for, loving and serving others better. I think that sums it all. But I do have a follow-up question, Dr. Kevin, to that, right? So, in this fast-paced world where, it's the era of texting, WhatsApp, and phone calls, how do you really isolate yourself even into this, 90 minutes or 1 hour to 90 minutes intense working and 10 minutes of break? Would you like to share some tips or your thought on that?
I think that nothing requires you to isolate yourself externally from others. And oftentimes that would be a kind of injustice to them. So I think that we don't want to be isolating ourselves, but you do want to have within your soul silence, an oasis of peace that's there. if you can have interior silence, you're never rushed. It's a wonderful thing to learn to move slightly more slowly. And if you're very rushed, even more. To get your body to slightly slow down in a way that's not visible to others, and to get your mind silent. Then the ability to shape what you're doing in the next hour and the rest of the day comes very naturally. It's a vision. It takes a second. The problem is that people are cogitating and creating noise in their minds. And that cogitation combines the worst aspects of their left brain and their background attention. So it's just this monologue continually running. Much better is to learn to foster the practice of interior silence, to be aware of your own being and the being of those around you, to bring the mind to rest. And then you're continually, I think, able to do this work of crafting and shaping, particularly if in that silence you're experiencing then a deeper sense of love.
Very nice, wonderfully said. So I think we're almost time, but I think we can take one last question. And again, that comes from one of our participants. And the question is the goal then to become more right brain oriented?
Yeah. So the height of the human brain is the right front top part of your neocortex. And that corresponds to being in flow, to having permanently positive appraisals, to be in the moment, and to be able to give your whole attention to whatever you're doing, and to work with motives of love and service. There are 3 negative habits. I haven't even mentioned complaining, but when people chronically complain, it flips them into the opposite state of mind. So chronically complaining, being quick to switch between tasks, and then working for outcomes. Those things end up making us be continually living in fear and continually worried and rushed and kind of harried. So, and that would be to be living more in the bottom left back part of us, which is where when you're just living for pursuing comfort and trying to get rid of discomfort and basically living with motives of fear. So yes, the goal is actually to be the silent love of immaterial goods is the highest function, and that is the highest function, and that's entirely right-brained.
Very nice. Wonderful, Dr. Kevin. Once again, we are so thankful to you for taking time out of your busy schedule to spend this Saturday afternoon with all of us, and your teachings. And, it has been very profound, and we are so grateful. And I'm sure our JKYog community is going to benefit tremendously from this session.
Well, thank you so much. It has been a great pleasure to be here, and I've found you, and I think if Kushi is able to hear, thank you, Kushi, for giving this invitation. He's a Harvard student that I had worked with here in my mentoring program, and the finest young man. So I am very happy to be meeting you all and speaking with you all. And if anyone is interested in optimalwork.com, we'll give people a coupon for a free month. So they get essentially 2 free months. It's JKYog 2020. And if they use that coupon, then we give them a free month of optimal work, which will reinforce everything that I've talked about today.
Wonderful, Dr. Kevin. That's amazing. So that's very nice of you to share this coupon for our community. So JKYog 2020. If you could use this coupon, and if you would like to, it's optimalworks.com, right, Kevin?
Optimalwork.com.
Optimalwork.com. So you
Exactly.
can go there and you can use the coupon JKYog 2020. That means you'll get 2 months of free service.
Exactly.
And we are very grateful for you for providing this for the benefit of everyone. And once again, we look forward to having you in some of our future forums as well. And thank you so much for taking the time to spend with our viewers today.
Very good. Thank you.